Hello and welcome to Catamount Community Connection. I'm your weekly host, Brian Collamore, and we host the program each and every Sunday across our 5 stations. And we call the show Catamount Community Connection because we like to speak with community leaders from the business, professional, nonprofit, and political arenas. And the goal of the program to inform and make our listeners aware of things that are going on statewide and also specifically in Rutland County. Our show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And we're already looking forward to the 180th fair coming up next August 2026. So today we have a very special pair of guests, and we'll talk to the Speaker of the House first, and then tomorrow when we record this, we'll be speaking with the President Pro Tem of the Senate. So we're very happy today on this show to be talking to Jill Krowinski of Burlington, who was elected Vermont Speaker of the House back in January of 2021. She is the 92nd Speaker and the 4th female Speaker of the House. I was there for her predecessor, who was the 3rd female Speaker of the House, Mitzi Johnson. Jill has served in the House since 2012 and was elected as House Majority Leader back in 2017. She is a graduate of the University of Pittsburgh. I did a little research there. It actually, all I had to do was look online, and all of that information is on the legislative website. So, Jill, welcome in, and thank you so much for taking some time to be with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here with you.
And I wanted to mention a few things, and we can certainly open it up to other topics, but I did come up with what I assume will be some of the major topics of consideration as the General Assembly gets back into gear in January of 2026. I think I had 4 items listed, and then sort of a budget item, and then anything else that you wanted to bring up. So let's talk about the first one, if we can, and this has to do with education and the task force that, as we record this, and we're recording it on Friday the 3rd, for airing on Sunday the 5th, and we may run this for a couple of weeks, actually, because I think it's going to be of interest to a lot of people. So when we are recording this, the so-called task force, which was appropriated some time and funds in the Act 73, is about halfway through their meetings. Nothing firm yet. I understand there was one district map that was introduced at the last meeting. I haven't really had a chance to look closely at it, but let's just say it sort of mirrors the technical centers throughout the state, but I'm sure there'll be other ones coming along. But I think I can call you Jill or Madam Speaker, whichever way you like.
Call me Jill.
Okay. This will probably be a big item of concern this year. It may not be the biggest. We may have some other things coming our way, but certainly in the just concluded session, it was probably, it was the last bill we did, so it was the biggest one. Mm-hmm. And I assume it will take front and center stage again this coming session.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the school redistricting task force. And that was born out of legislation that we passed this last legislative session to really tackle the challenges with the quality of education that we have and how we pay for it. And so as everyone remembers, we've been seeing property taxes going up, and quality for students going down. And there's many reasons that we can get into for how that's been happening. But we want to make sure that kids across the state have equal access and opportunity to a great education at a cost that Vermonters can afford. And so we worked really hard last session to build a framework and how we can achieve those goals. So coming out of that bill, we had 2 groups meeting this summer, getting public input and working on these maps to scale the number of districts that we have in the state. So the 2 are the redistricting task force and then the Commission on the Future of Public Education. The task force, we are asking through the legislation to come back to the legislature in January with up to 3 maps for us to work from. The committee does, as you mentioned, Brian, there was one that's been put on the table to review and to work on, and we know that others are coming. I'm really confident in this group of folks coming together and doing this really hard work to set us up for this conversation in January. And alongside of that, the Commission on the Future of Public Education is creating a dialogue in communities across the state to ask Vermonters, well, what do you want out of your public education? What are your concerns? And they just released a survey for people to fill out that you can find on my website, and I'm sure it'll be circulating online. But my website is speaker.vermont.gov. So many opportunities for people to get involved in the process. That's really important, and opportunities to set us up to continue this really critical work in January.
Yeah, and you've certainly put your finger on two of the pressing issues with respect to the property taxes and people beginning to feel, very, very stressed each year when they get their bill. Yeah. The municipal side, they have a little bit of control over. Well, they have a lot more control than they do of the other. And then the education side, which a lot of people feel they don't have as much control over. So the property taxes, we're not necessarily a horrible state in terms of testing and grades, but we're not anywhere near where I think we'd like to be. I've always heard that we're somewhere in the middle of the pack. And then the third thing, Jill, that I think a lot of people aren't aware of, or at least if they are, it doesn't sort of rise to the level of discussion, is the continuing decline in enrollment of our student population. Yeah. And that's got to sort of drive a little bit of the discussion, I think, too.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times the word scale comes into play when we're talking about this, right? With less kids in a classroom, what does scale look like given where we are with enrollment? And that is a really important part of this conversation. And, there are other things that impact this that I think all feel related together. And there are other topics that we're going to talk about here and that we're going to be prioritizing when we get back in this session. And that's, the rising cost of healthcare and the cost of housing and how those, feed into some of the challenges when it comes to the school budgets as well. And so we made some good progress on those last session, and we'll continue to work on them in January.
And I'm sure you are aware that as, I sit in the Senate in Rutland County, I have never been to more school board meetings in my life than this past summer because people were really concerned. You know how a rumor gets started and gets passed around and they're going to close our school and they're going to do this and those people up there. Well, the fact of the matter is that we hope that it will be a local decision in terms of merging schools. And I'll just, again, from personal experience, tell you, I think it's going to be the elementary grades are one model, and then you've got the middle school model, and then the high school, and they're gonna be treated, I think, differently by the task force. And by the way, there's 11 members of that task force who are, as I mentioned, are about halfway through their process. So a lot of people here, and I'm sure in Chittenden County and throughout the state, are very concerned about the local control aspect that they feel they might lose. So, much to do, and some of those decisions are going to be, I think, hard to make, but I have a feeling we're going to be able to tackle it.
I couldn't agree more, Brian. And like I said, this isn't something that's just going to happen to a district. This is a lot of conversations, a lot of opportunity for people to give their input. And again, we're treating elementary schools different than we're treating high schools. We don't want little kids to be on a bus for an hour. We're not talking about that. So I know, as you mentioned, there is a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of fear. And I just want to, reinforce for people that there's lots of opportunities to give feedback and to learn about this process and to reach out to your legislators if you have questions.
We're talking to the Speaker of the House in Vermont, Joe Krowinski, who's from Burlington. And let's move into the next topic if we can. And this is, again, of concern to everybody, I think, in the state. Some communities maybe a little bit more so than others. Public safety and whether we can affect any more changes in terms of the conditions of release, maybe tightening those up a little bit. I think the general consensus throughout the state is that, and I don't know what the percentage is where you are, Jill, but in Rutland County, I've heard it's like 75, 80% of the repeat offenders, and we're talking retail theft and all that kind of misbehavior, are the same people. And they are, I hate to use the term, but frequent flyers in the courtroom. They come back, it seems like, every week. And people talk about this revolving door, and isn't there a way we can solve it? So I think in the judiciary committees on both sides, the House and the Senate, people will be hard at work to figure out maybe some new tools to give our judges to make people a little bit more accountable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I travel around the state. One of the great things that I get to do as speaker is when we're not in session, I hit the road and I travel all across the state, hit every county. I have a goal to sit down with every member of the House. We have 150 members of the House to get a pulse of what's happening in communities around the state. And public safety is one that absolutely comes up. And I'm feeling it in Burlington. I know you're feeling it in Rutland. Folks are feeling it in Brattleboro and, all over the state. We've been making investments in our court system to help deal with the backlog of cases that was a problem before the pandemic. We had a backlog. And then when the pandemic happened and we shut down some of the courts and had to prioritize what they would be taking up, that backlog got so much worse. And so we identified that this is one strategy. It's not going to solve the whole problem, but it's one strategy to help get more staff and more judges in there to help get those cases through and help address that. So that's one strategy that we've been using. I know there's a lot of conversations happening, as you mentioned, of what are some other tools this upcoming session that we can look at to help with the repeat offender issue. We have a challenge with folks who are suffering from some mental health challenges, and we don't have the tools right now. And I don't know what the answer is for that, but you may have heard of stories of someone committed a couple of offenses. They've been deemed not competent by the court to go through the process, and there's no place for them to go. And they're going back home, or they're going onto the streets, and they're not getting the treatment that they need. How do we tackle that? We know, I was just talking to a state's attorney the other day who was explaining, what they're seeing in their community, and they just feel helpless, that there's nothing to do to help get people treatment. So I agree that this is a place where we'll be continuing to do work next session.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think there's an intersection between drug use, or I'll just say not abuse necessarily, but people that are suffering from conditions of addiction, and the the only way some of them feel that they have a way out is to commit retail theft, so they have money to continue to use those substances. So you're right. There's the mental health aspect, and also we've got to find a way to get people sober, straight, and back on track. And, many of them didn't ever intend to find themselves in a particular situation. But we need to, you're right. We've had down here in Rutland a huge, substantial burden of this hotel motel program. And unfortunately, when we did it, we didn't make it sort of a requirement that people took advantage of some services. So many of them, as you correctly point out, Jill, were, they come in and they're let right back out again. And that's the worst place for them to go, is back on the street, because they'll be, hanging around with people that are in the same situation. So we've got to find an answer. And again, it'll be something that the legislature, through its judicial committees, will probably have to tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually going to be down in Rutland in a couple of weeks, meeting with your local Brock Community Action Group.
Oh, yeah, Tom Donahue and those guys. Yep, for sure.
That's right, to talk about this. And so I'm looking forward to that visit. And there's so many different factors that go into it, right? Like, we don't have enough shelter beds. That's part of it. We don't, there's just so many things. Workforce, access to workforce programs, there's so many things that factor into this, and how can we make sure we're getting the right services out there to people to make sure that we get them housed and back in the workforce and healthy. That's really important. So, public safety, another one we'll be tackling for sure.
We're talking to the Speaker of the General Assembly in Vermont. We don't normally have someone of your stature on our show, Jill, but it's great to have you. Jill Krowinski, she's from Burlington, and she is the House Speaker. And again, the second half of today's show will be featuring Phil Baruth, state senator from also the Burlington area, who is the pro tem, and that's Latin for, in my book, boss. So he's my boss on the Senate side. And I got to tell you, and you came down to Rutland earlier this summer, and the Rutland Herald was there that day, Gordon Tricillo, and made a point of saying that he was sort of like, not surprised, but he was very happy to see the interaction between the legislators who showed up, who are of one party for the most part. In fact, I think it was almost a kind of 100 to 1, because you're a Democrat and I'm a Republican, but we get along and we're willing to listen to the other side, and it's not as nasty as it sometimes gets in Washington. And, we could talk about the government shutdown, and that's the danger of recording something, though, today. They could come to a solution to it, but my guess is it's going to probably take a few more days from when we're recording this. I did see something from the Joint Fiscal Office today that kind of outlines how Vermont is going to fare with the federal shutdown. Anyway, happy to have Jill Krowinski, the House Speaker, with us today. But I did want to mention that because I think it does point to a little bit different landscape and atmosphere here in Vermont from certainly national politics. And that's a great thing to, it was just great having you come down. And when I see you in the hall, I say, hey, Jill, what's going on? And it isn't like I have to think down there they actually move to the other side of the street so they don't have to say hi to each other. It gets to be kind of silly. But, okay.
I'm really glad you brought that up. Just to discuss that for 1 minute.
Sure.
I think what's really important, and especially in this really challenging time where there's a lot of fear and every day there's just this chaos that's very overwhelming. And what I'm proud about is that we've worked really hard in the legislature to build relationships and to be able to disagree in a committee or disagree on the House floor and then be able to go out and get a drink together.
Yeah.
And that is so important. And Representative Tom Burdett, West Rutland, he and I have been friends for a long time. I was down visiting him in Rutland and some others and said, would you be willing to come to West Rutland? No one comes to West Rutland. I said, absolutely. And he organized with his town manager this really great conversation in a town hall. And I think we're trying so hard to keep that our way here and to keep that tradition alive. And it's hard, but I really appreciate it that we can be of different parties and come together and have, a really friendly conversation about what's working and what's not working and where we can find common ground to get things done.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if we're going to get to every topic I have written down, but another huge one is the healthcare and the costs to Vermonters for that. It's not going down. It probably won't go down next year. It seems to find a way to keep on a trajectory of being more and more expensive every year. But it's something, again, just like the education reform and public safety, that we at least have to really pay attention to, I think, next year.
Absolutely. I think with all of the conversation and debate around education and public safety and housing, healthcare kind of went under the radar in what we were doing. And I think that we did some really exciting work last session that's helping Vermonters, that's helping to slow down the rising cost of healthcare while increasing access and protecting our community hospitals that we really care about. We gave the Green Mountain Care Board some more tools to help with these budgets. We passed a bill that targets the cost of prescription drugs. Like, a lot of people didn't know this, that hospitals were charging approximately 600% more than the average price for prescription drugs. We put a cap on that to say 130%. That's a huge reduction. That's going to help Vermonters. Obviously, you mentioned a little bit about what's happening in Washington. I'm really worried about the loss of federal funding for cost assistance for Vermonters that are buying health insurance through Vermont Health Connect. The federal administration, the Trump administration, cut the premium assistance money out of the budget package, which is a loss of, I think, around $80 million available to help Vermonters. So I'm worried, and we're going to have to come back in January to look at how we manage this. So I think it's a couple of different strategies in healthcare. It's looking at what we passed last session to make sure it's on track. It's doing the work. It's doing the job we wanted it to, and to continue to look at what other tools and strategies can we put into place to help Vermonters. But, it is scary. Like, I just really worry. The last thing we want is Vermonters to be like, I can't afford this and not have health insurance, because that's not good for anyone. It's not good for families. It's not good for the hospital system and the health insurance system. It's not good. And so we're going to have to find a path there on healthcare. Yeah, for sure. I know the Rutland Regional Medical Center was happy that their budget was approved by the Green Mountain Care Board. I'm not sure that the hospital in your community was as lucky. I think they probably did not approve it, but I'm not 100% sure up at UVM. But anyway, we've got a meeting at the medical center here coming up later this month. So we'll be looking forward to hearing their concerns. So housing is another big one. I do think we've started to really push the ball up the hill with housing. It became a huge amount of work that was done on that, I think, in the last couple of years. And hopefully we can continue that too. Absolutely. And, I was just in West Rutland, the Marble Village apartments that are coming online soon are so cool. Such a great example of what we're seeing in communities across the state, and where our investments, our work around Act 250 modernization, all of these partnerships forming to get more housing online. And that's just a great example of some of the success stories out there. And now what we're seeing is some of the legislation that we passed last session, going through rulemaking, getting figured out so that we can be launching those soon. And one of those was called CHIP, which is a tool for communities to help with infrastructure. We know that's a challenge in some areas. So, I feel like, Ryan, we've been talking about housing as something that we always work on every year, like since forever. But it takes time. Like we've invested at this point probably over $1 billion into housing across the state, and it takes years to get that up and going. So you're just seeing some of the investments that we maybe made 3 years ago now seeing as an apartment complex or condos or a new community being built. So it's exciting, and I think, again, this is a topic that is always top of mind when we're in session and looking for new ways to, put more money into first-time home buyer programs, or money to help fix up old dilapidated apartments, to get those back online. One thing, as I've been traveling around the state, I've been hearing concerns about vacant houses, vacant buildings, and what can we do to get those back online. And so I think that might be one thing that we hear about this upcoming session, taking some testimony and figuring out if there's something that we can do there to not have to build from scratch, but take what's there and see if we can make some progress there. We're talking to House Speaker Joe Krowinski's with us. And so
Yeah, we did healthcare, housing, public safety, and education reform. The other thing that will probably be a lot of a challenge this year, we have two budget items that we normally consider. First is the so-called BAA, or the Budget Adjustment Act, which is an annual truing up of last year's fiscal year with what happened. And then, of course, the big bill later on in the session. But I don't think I'm misspeaking by saying that a lot of what we were able to do was with one-time money, and we don't have a lot of that left. So I think it's going to be really tough this year to figure out where to spend the money we do have.
Yeah, absolutely. When we passed the budget last year, I'm trying to remember what the exact number was. I think we set aside in one-time money to help us this coming year, maybe between $75 and $80 million. Say, we know that there are changes coming from the feds, and that's going to impact, cuts from the feds that's going to impact our budget. And there's always we don't know. Like, we are weathering some tough times right now. Like, for example, I was up in the Kingdom earlier this week in Newport, and I was talking to a woman who owns a restaurant there. And I was just asking her, like, how is business going? And you're right next to Canada. How are you feeling? And she was just telling me that these Trump tariffs are just killing them, and they're not seeing the number of folks coming down from Canada to visit, to hang out, to get some lunch. And she said they were down 50%. 50%. Like, how do you? So I think we're going to see this, the cascade of these impacts on our budget. We rely on a lot of tourism money, so that's a concern. So we're going to have to make some tough decisions, and I think we're going to need to figure out together what are the core functions of government that we need to ensure we're doing well, and not funding 50 things okay. But doing like 10 things really well so that we are able to provide services to Vermonters that they need, and that's kind of all the core things that we've been talking about on your show, right, Brian? It's healthcare, it's housing, public safety, core functions of government that are really important to Vermonters. So, I'm concerned. I feel like every year, though, we come in and we're just like, oh, this is going to be so hard. And we do work really well together to find a way forward. And I don't doubt that won't be the case this session, that we work together and we figure out a compromise.
Yeah, for sure. Well, believe it or not, we have about a minute left.
No, that goes by so fast.
I know it does go by fast. I probably should have reserved an hour for it, but I thought the first time out, you as House Speaker and then Phil Baruth later in the show as the President of the Senate, we'll just try to kind of dip our toes in the water and see how things go. Are there any other issues that you'd like to just briefly address?
Well, I think this kind of hits on a couple of different topics. I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. But in the conversation of education, there's concern about what we do with maybe schools that do end up closing, and how do we continue to make that school, that building, still a critical part of the community, serving whatever needs that community has. And I was down in Bennington a couple of weeks ago and did a tour of the Ben High Project, which is an old high school that had been vacant for a long time. And thanks to the tireless efforts of a lot of people, including Zach Hale, they've been able to transform this old high school into a place where they're going to have a child care facility. And then I think the local Y is going to have the gym there. They have housing that's part of it. And I think it's just a great example of what we're trying to do to be creative in this moment that we're in, and to have this old building that's sitting there that's right in downtown be transformed for childcare, for housing, for community space is really cool. It's really exciting. And I think that's like a conversation we're going to have. Like, how can we help projects like that succeed in other corners of the state?
Very well said. And I hate that this is over. I really do. We could keep talking for a long time.
We sure could.
I'll extend another invitation. I promise to have you come back on before we convene again in January. But thank you so much for spending time with us today. Jill Krowinski, the Vermont Speaker of the House. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. So great to be here, and I'm happy to come back anytime.
Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection, our weekly public affairs show. I'm Brian Collamore, and again, thank you to the Speaker of the House, Jill Krowinski, for joining us in the first half of the program. We are equally delighted to welcome in the Senate Pro Tem, Senator Phil Baruth of Burlington, as our guest for the second half. Phil currently serves as the President Pro Tem of the Senate, which in quite bald language, he's my boss. So there you go. He also serves as the clerk of the Committee on Appropriations, and he sits on the Senate Committee of Judiciary. First elected to the Senate back in 2010, he has served on the Education, Economic Development, Judiciary, and Agriculture committees, and has served 4 years as Senate Majority Leader before that. He is a teacher at UVM and has been doing that since '93. And Phil lives in Burlington and was first elected, I should probably tell you, in 2011. So we're all sort of in that neighborhood. I was first elected in 14, and I think Jill was 12. So kind of like all on the same page, so to speak. Our show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And we're looking forward to the 180th Vermont State Fair at the fairgrounds here in Rutland. That's next August. So, Senator Baruth, welcome in. Thank you for taking time out to speak with us today. It is a pleasure. And we're going to talk about, 4 or 5 different topics, I think. I'm hoping I can leave room for you to bring up anything that we didn't cover. The first one on my list was, and I think it'll be one of the major topics and issues that we have to address this year in the General Assembly, and that's the whole educational reform. We have a task force made up of 11 members. They are, as we record this, about halfway through their meetings. So I think they still have, I think it's 4 left, something like that. Not sure where they're going to land. It seems like there's some folks on that pretty much are okay with what's going on, and then there's some folks that want a drastic change. But I'll just leave that up in the air, and certainly you don't have to weigh in on that, Phil. But the topic itself will be, I'm sure, a big concern for the Senate and the House in the upcoming session.
Absolutely. Good to be with you, Brian. People might remember that when we passed that education bill and the governor signed it, a lot of what goes into effect is contingent on consolidation maps that theoretically are going to come out of the committee you mentioned. So it's important that maps come out. It's important that the public weigh in, and that's going to be in the very first weeks of the session, I think the end of January, beginning of February. So people should be on the lookout for meetings in their community. There'll be a lot of them, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it is important that the task force hears from, I don't want to say both sides. I'm sure there's more than 2 sides to this. It's a very big project for sure. We have continuing increasing costs for property taxpayers. We have test scores that are not the worst in the country. I will be fair about that. It's somewhere in the middle. But it doesn't look that they're nudging upward at all. And then the third thing that maybe a lot of people don't talk about too much is the continuing decline in student enrollment. And that has a factor. And, the governor put forth a proposal last year. I honestly think he knew it wasn't going to be accepted immediately, and that was to go to 5 districts in terms of school districts. That seems a bit too big. I don't know what the answer is. Is it to align with the CTEs in the state? Is it something else? I don't know. But as you say, that'll be the job of the task force to come up with at least 3. I think it's 3 maps, so to speak, and then the legislature either accepts one of them and works from there, or we can say no, we don't like any of them, and then we're back to square one. But you're right. One of the provisions in Act 73 was that if the committee didn't come up with something, then the law itself would be repealed. So it will be a giant issue, I'm sure, coming up And we'll do our best to, to wade through it. A lot of people are concerned about the local control that they may be losing. But I'm perplexed myself as to how to best attack this. And thank goodness there's 11 much smarter people than I working on a solution for that.
Go ahead. Just the one thing I'll say before we get off that topic is people remember that their property taxes have gone up, really dramatically in the last few years. That's not the way it was when I got into the Senate 15 years ago. Then we were having rises of maybe 3% a year, right in line with inflation. But as people know, the last couple of years, if the legislature doesn't act dramatically to bring those rates down, they're at 15, 18%. People can't afford that. And so, to me, the root cause of this, well, there are two. One is exploding healthcare costs.
Yeah.
That's a whole other issue. But the one that we really can do something about is that the educational establishment was built for about 125,000 kids. We now have less than 80,000, somewhere around 75, maybe a little more. So as the educational establishment has grown, the student population has shrunk. And eventually the rubber was going to hit the road. Voters would express their anger over that, which they did this past election. And so now we have the tough work of trying to figure out how to reduce redundancy, for instance. Do you need a superintendent in, 190 districts? The smart move, I think, would be to give real consideration to, can we reduce the size of the infrastructure, not the physical infrastructure really, but the administrative structure that's taking care of almost half of the number of students we used to have.
Yeah. And certainly central offices will be reduced. As you mentioned, Phil, superintendents will probably have to sharpen their resumes up. It's just a fact of life that unless people are willing to spend that 15% more every year, which I think is not true, we're going to have to do something. And so it will fall to... The other thing, that keeps coming up, and I've been to more school board meetings this past summer than ever before. Not that I didn't enjoy going to them before, but the people really are they're afraid. They're nervous about what could be coming up. And so, we did manage, and certainly you were part of that process, to buy down the property tax rate last year. And in some respects, the year before that. I don't know what's left in terms of one-time money. I'm not sure we could do that again. So we need to really, put our nose to the grindstone, I think.
Right. And I mentioned healthcare as a driver of all of this. We did a couple of things last session that should help out in that area. One was called reference-based pricing, which allowed hospitals to accept a little less for the services they're providing in line with what the averages are. And things like that, I think, will ultimately bring healthcare costs down some. But, you mentioned 2 years ago, then the December 1st letter said we were going to have an 18 to 20% rise. We spent about $70 million, close to $80 million, bringing that down to 13.9%. And that's all we could afford that year. If this year we get a drop in healthcare costs, but there's a spike at the same time, we could be still in a place where we can't afford, the ultimate costs. And, it's going to be an election year. People are going to be watching closely, and I want to make sure that we get people's costs down as close to bottom as we can.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know how to put all of these into the 4 or 5 items I have, like on a list of what's more important. The education reform will be certainly near the top, if not the top. But you're right, healthcare costs have to be in the top 2 or 3 too, because we can't keep going the way it is, and that does impact to a great degree what we're spending on education. So the two of them are interlocked. And if we could cut back on the healthcare costs, we'd be doing ourselves a favor. So I know that there'll be more bills coming from Health and Welfare on our side and the Health Committee on the House side to try to rein in those costs. It's tough. You're dealing with commercial insurance companies in some cases that, they enjoy making a profit, and there's not the same level of competition that there was for a while between the insurance companies either. So they're kind of like driving that bus to, I guess, use a little bit of a pun. Okay, let's move on if we can. We could talk about the health care if you like, but that's like the whole hour we could probably spend talking about that. The other thing that keeps coming up here, and I'm sure it is in Chittenden County too, is a public safety issue. As I understand it, and I could be way off base, the bail reform, speaking just of the bail, would probably not be something we could just pass a statute to change. As I understand it, I could be wrong, I think that would take a constitutional change, and that is a very long 6-year process to do. But and again, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not on judiciary. You are, so you could probably educate me. Right now, as I understand it, a judge can only impose bail or jail someone without any bail if they're convinced that defendant won't show up again. That's the only reason right now. Right. It has nothing to do with public safety or violent crime or anything like that. That defaults to what are called conditions of release, and that's where most of the work has been done in the legislature the last few years. We've made great strides, don't get me wrong, but people are still, and again, not to sound too negative about this, but when you read the same name or see the same thing on the court docket time after time after time, and I'm talking retail theft and minor violations that take up the court's time and kind of clog it up, and the so-called frequent flyers that are in court, it seems like every week, people get really upset and mad about that. And I keep telling them there's the only way for that bail thing to change is with a constitutional amendment. And I'm not sure anybody's going to want to do that. But I think there's more work to be done to sort of tighten things up and I think give tools to our judicial system to make people a little bit more accountable.
And you're right in everything you say. The first time, a long time ago when I learned about the Vermont Constitution and what it had to say about bail, I thought I was hearing the lawyer wrong. I said, you mean if somebody's a threat to public safety, you can't hold them? And he said, that's right. Honestly, that seems a little crazy to me. I understand that the worry is that people might abuse that power. Judges might abuse that power to put people in jail by just, for instance, with systemic racism over the years, there was a period in Vermont history and American history where if you were a black descendant, you were going to wind up in jail. And the reason, had it been constitutional, might have been that you were a danger to others. So I think it's a complicated issue. I doubt, honestly, that we would have the votes to pass an amendment like that because of those other issues involved. Mm-hmm. But what I will say is people don't realize, I don't think, that over the last couple of years, we have spoken to this very problem. And so, for instance, we increased the penalties for retail theft, and we made them, there's a new, stronger penalty. Judges are empowered more with crimes of a smaller size. So the thing we were hearing from some police officers was that the criminals were savvy enough to know how much they could steal and stay below the level where they would be prosecuted. Yeah. So we did lower that amount, and we made it easier if a judge wants to, have consequences for someone, they can do that. The other thing that we did is we established a program of pretrial supervision because we have a big backlog in our judicial system, and it means that somebody might wait 2 years for their trial or for their hearing. So in that time, they may rack up other charges, and it just turns out to be this endless cycle. So what we've established in a pilot program in a couple of counties is that we will monitor people as they're waiting for trial, and they will have to check in, and there will be consequences for them if they're offending against their conditions of release. So that's, honestly an expensive endeavor, keeping track of people while they're waiting to come to trial. But it looks like it's having a good effect in the counties where we've done it. So this would be a way to try to get rid of the frequent flyers flying in the time before they come to court.
Yeah. And I'll just mention that, part of the problem that I saw with the so-called hotel motel program was, that people were unfortunately addicted to substances. And so if you don't provide them with services to get off whatever it is, they go back on the street, they hang out with the same people, and by golly, they're back again. So Rutland, and I think other counties now have joined in. When Senator Peg Flory was in, she and a wonderful, wonderful judge down here, Francis McCaffrey, came up with, at the time it was called drug court, now it's called treatment court. And it is an amazingly successful program to help people graduate from this program and get on a straight path. And it's really worked out well. So I'm a big believer in providing services for people and not just letting them go back time after time after time. And I know there's other treatment courts throughout the state. I don't know that every county has one, but I'm pretty darn proud of the one we have here.
Well, and I agree with you 100%. What I would say is that if I'm remembering correctly, those are funded in part by the federal government.
Yep.
And those monies look like they're going to dry up under the Trump administration.
Yeah, well, so, we could probably spend an hour on that too. The bad thing there is you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. It seems like. Right. You go, phew, we dodged that one, and then all of a sudden there's something else. So I did get something from Joint Fiscal. I'm sure you looked at it yesterday with the shutdown, which is not part of the cutbacks, but it has to do with money. And it looks like Vermont, for the most part, is going to be okay if nothing else changes. And that's the danger of recording this. Senator Baruth and I are recording this on Saturday the 4th. It'll air on the 5th, and I'm going to run it, I think, for 2 weeks in a row. And by then, the shutdown could be over and everything that we're talking about goes away. But, you never know. So, you're right. Lots of things to think about in terms of maybe refining some more public safety changes. Got two other topics. Housing is one. And then the challenging year that I think it'll be for both what we call the BAA, or the Budget Adjustment Act, and then, of course, the budget itself, which we call the Big Bill. We've seemed to make a little bit of progress on the housing front. I drive around Rutland County, and I see things getting built, and it makes me feel pretty good.
Well, and people should know that over the last 6 years or so, I would say, we've spent about $1.5 billion on housing. A lot of that was money that came with the pandemic, so the ARPA money and other monies. We very quickly plowed hundreds of millions of dollars into immediate building projects and trying to make those projects affordable and permanently affordable. So all of that is designed to help the housing crisis. I would say to people, if you don't think anything is happening on the housing front, go to VHCB's website. That's the Vermont Housing Conservation Board. They have on their website, they have a kind of running thing along the side of groundbreakings. And you will see that there are projects going up everywhere, all across the state. And they also have articles when these things are eventually open to the public. And so, I would say just in the last couple of months, I've seen 10 or 20 projects hit the finish line. So these are things that we started during the pandemic. It takes a long time to nurture them along, but we really are seeing the results now.
Yeah. I've seen West Rutland here and also Rutland City, and I just driving around, I can see the buildings going up. They put the the wall board up and then the framing and all of that. And so things are moving, and I think people should be at least heartened that we did recognize we had a huge problem. Still more to come. There's no doubt about that. But as you say, you can't build a building in a week. It takes you a while first to get all the permitting in place and the funding, and then get it put up. Okay, so we got like 5 minutes left. By the way, we're talking to Senator Phil Baruth of Burlington, who is the Senate President pro tem. And so that means he takes the podium when the Lieutenant Governor's out. But he also directs the Senate in terms of who does what in terms of committee work and what bills that will be coming up that he sees as important and can get behind and support, and what bills probably, as we like to say, will stay on the wall, which means they won't be acted on. This is the second year of a biennium, so we only have until, I think it's December 1st, to submit bills this time. And if they don't pass, they die. And you have to come back. If you get reelected, you have to come back and reintroduce a bill. So happy to have him with us. I mentioned the budget. It seems like it's always true that we go back and we go, oh, this is going to be a tough year for the budget, but somehow we get it done. But we don't have as much federal money that we did, as you pointed out, with ARPA and everything else. So I think we're going to be tightening the belt even a little bit more.
Exactly. And in addition to that, there's this threat now, and as you say, Vermont's not getting it directly yet, but we will, from the Trump administration, especially to states that vote Democratic in terms of, their legislatures. We obviously have a Republican governor, but, I think the Trump administration considers us a blue state, and they're being very open about the fact that they intend to focus the scrutiny and the punishment at the federal level on blue states. So you see what they're doing in California and Illinois and other places. Hopefully we escape that, but when we built the budget this year, we built in contingencies with percentages in each area of the budget. So if federal money all of a sudden got pulled to a really large extent, for instance, the Republicans, the National Republican Party's big, beautiful bill, one of the things that is slated to do in 27 is to kick thousands and thousands of Vermonters off Medicaid. And at that point, we will be faced with the question of how do we make those people whole? How do we make sure that they and their families have health care? The Trump administration, this isn't an accident. They are making it very clear that they're doing this on purpose, and that states that Trump likes, he's trying to protect in other ways. So that's why we built those contingencies into the budget. So far, they haven't been triggered, and that's great. But as you say, when we get in January, it's going to be another tough year.
Yeah, for sure. About a minute left, Senator. If there's any other issue that you want to bring up that we haven't talked about, or sort of any wrap up. Yep.
Very quickly, I am interested in having a really robust discussion this biennium, this year, about whether we need inspections for our vehicles every year. And I say that as somebody who every year, when I take my car in, I'm told that I owe $1,200 in order to keep it on the road. And it's always for tires. It's always for things that seem to me to be relatively secondary to immediate safety concerns on the road. So there's a lot of research out there in states that do it every other year, and some states don't do it at all, that we don't gain a lot from the every year inspection, and it costs people a lot of money and a lot of anxiety. So there are a couple of other people in the Senate so far who are interested in that idea. Obviously, we were just talking about where we're going to find money. If we went to every other year, that's $3 million that the state would not get.
Right.
So it's a question of, can we find that money elsewhere, and do we think it makes sense to go to an every other year system for inspections? I'm of the mind that it does, but I am going to listen to people, money people, transportation people, and folks around the state and try to see if we can come to some conclusion about it.
Okay. So there may be a bill going into Senate Transportation about a every other year inspection of vehicles. Maybe you're going to put that in. I don't know, but
I think Senator White has already drafted a bill.
Okay. So definitely we'll be talking about that. You're right. It does create a little bit of a hole in the budget if you don't get that inspection money coming in, but there's probably other ways to do it.
And I think for the people who are listening, if you think about the last couple of times you went to get your car inspected, it was probably a lot more than you expected because you're at that point, a captive customer. You have to have the sticker, and if the guy at the garage tells you owe $1,200, you owe $1,200.
Yeah. Well, you'll definitely have support from some people because I have heard that refrain more than once down here for sure.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Senator, thank you so much for joining us. I would love to have you come back at some point. Maybe we can make it a full hour next time. The speaker has also told me that she would be glad to come back as well. Maybe between now and January. I don't know.
Can I just break in with one thing?
Sure.
This is to all your listeners. And anybody out there, if you ever have a question about whether you made the right choice in Brian Collamore in the Senate, let me just tell you, he's beloved around the building. When he talks, people listen. So all I'll say is that you do your voters well. Well,
I really appreciate that, Phil. I really do. And, it's one of those things, and Jill and I did talk about it, too, that we don't act the same way they do in other states and certainly in Washington. You are a Democrat. I'm a Republican. Jill's a Democrat. We still talk to each other. We can disagree, but we're very civil, and I consider you a friend. And, it's nice to just get along, even if we're not going to always agree. So there's where I am.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Listen, thank you again, and we will see you before long, I'm sure.
All right. See you soon, Brian.
Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye. Okay. So that's our interview with Senator Baruth, and we will take one more break here on Catamount Community Connection and come right back. Welcome back to Catamount Community Connection. Just a few reminders before we leave you for the week. I want to remind you about the Wheels for Warmth event, which will take place Thursday, October 23rd and Friday, October 24th. If you have used tires that you want to donate so that folks will have money to buy heating fuel this winter, those are the 2 days for you to do that. And you can bring them to Casella Construction on Route 7 in Pittsford and drop the tires off. If they don't pass inspection, there is a $5 charge to take them, but most of the time the DMV will allow those tires to be sold. So that's Thursday and Friday, October 23rd and 24th. And then on Saturday the 25th, that is the day for the annual tire sale. And that will take place also at Casella Construction, right on Route 7, headed north. It'll be on your left-hand side as you come down the hill. And the sale will be from 8 until noon on that day at Casella Construction. So that's the Wheels for Warmth event. And again, it'll be to help people out to the Warmth Support Program, which provides emergency heating and fuel assistance to vulnerable Vermonters. Here in Rutland County, that all goes to Brock, the Bennington-Rutland Opportunity Council. The other event we will make you aware of is the 42nd annual Pittsford Volunteer Fire Department's Haunted House. And again, the dates on that, October 17th and 18th, and again on October 24th and 25th. And the ticket sales are from 6 until 9, 6 p.m. to 9. And the first wagon will go up to the haunted house shortly after 6 that evening. And you'll be up to Wow, 42nd time to get scared, I guess is the way to put it. But the Pittsford Volunteer Fire Department raises enough money on those 4 nights so that basically the property taxpayers in Pittsford don't have to worry about the fire department's budget being on the tax bill. And they also help out 2 of the other volunteer fire departments and the rescue squad. It's a great time. It's a lot of fun. And we know people have been waiting for this again. So again, the 17th and 18th, that's a Friday and a Saturday, and then the 24th and 25th for the Pittsford Volunteer Fire Department's annual Haunted House. Thanks for joining us this week on Catamount Community Connection. We will see all of you next week here on the radio.